Hello, and welcome to this update webinar for MLDS mentors. My name is Dr. Tammy Mitchell, and I am joined by my colleagues, Dr. Shelley Nixon Green and Dr. Eric Johnson from the Community Training and Assistance Center. Project Impact is a partnership with the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and CTAC to expand and take MLDS to its next iteration. The goals of this project are to, 1, enable MLDS to reach more principals across the state, and 2, to expand and develop new capacities principals need to address the increased challenges exacerbated by the pandemic. And so here's an agenda for our time together. We're going to be giving you updates on student well-being, academic acceleration, and teacher recruitment and development. We're also going to show you some new resources, including a website, some nice infographics that can help you explain these key concepts. And right off the press, new this summer is a new mentor resource guide. And so without further ado, I'd like to pass this along to Dr. Shelley Nixon Green as she tells us more about the updates regarding student well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. The new content for student well-being is Treatment 9 within the Learning Experience 5, Reading and Shaping School Culture. Student well-being treatment really focuses on 2 core concepts. The first is well-being. We define student well-being as the ability to successfully handle life stresses and adapt to changes in difficult times. Supporting student well-being includes the principles, tools, and strategies that assist students and educators. The purpose is to develop self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and interpersonal skills essential to student and educator success. The second concept is around trauma and having schools be trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive. Trauma is the response to an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that is physically or emotionally harmful and that has a lasting impact on an individual. Trauma can have a broad impact on a student's learning, including their behaviors, relationship, and their actual capacity to learn. Educators who are trauma-informed when they understand the impact of trauma, recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma, and respond in a trauma-informed manner that provides support and avoids re-traumatizing the student. Educators who become trauma-informed are better equipped to support students who have experienced trauma and facilitate personally and academically beneficial outcomes for the students that they serve. The MLDS Leading for Student Wellbeing treatment is composed of 4 essential elements that you see here: strong relationships, knowing and managing self and others, culture and climate, and the 4th, trauma-informed practice. Essential element 1 is strong relationships. Strong relationships benefit both the student and the educator. Research tells us that having at least one school adult can protect against a variety of mental health factors and improve student engagement and their outcomes, academic outcomes. Teacher-student relationships may also improve teacher well-being by mitigating certain classroom stressors, demonstrating their impact not just for students, but also for the adults that serve them. It is especially important now for schools to put in place systems and structures that support student-teacher relationships. Essential element 2 is knowing and managing self and others. Models for student well-being attempt to identify the factors shown to be related to success in the world Included in these models are such things as self-management, self-awareness, relationship engagement with others, and skills for emotional regulation. In Essential Element 2, we emphasize 3 domains of learning: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. MLDS participants will explore these domains and discuss how they apply to effective classroom management and instruction. Student well-being at school is linked directly to school culture and climate. Principals are key to building a supportive school climate and developing responses to students' well-being needs. In Essential Element 3, participants will learn more about what to look for and how to implement a positive school culture and climate in their schools. One exercise that participants are walked through, which is very effective, is the culture walk. In this activity, principals have an opportunity to visit each other's schools and look for elements of culture and climate represented in this treatment. Finally, our 4th essential element is trauma-informed practices. Trauma is prevalent in our schools. More than 2/3 of children report at least one traumatic event by the age of 16. Children who are exposed to adverse childhood experiences, such as many experienced during the pandemic, often exhibit challenges with skills critical for success in school, including executive functioning, social skills, and emotional regulations. Educators, therefore, must be equipped with the skills to recognize and respond appropriately to trauma and ensure students' emotional well-being and academic success is intact. Essential Element 4 guides us through some of those foundational pieces, including the 4 R's: realize, recognize, respond, and resist. One new enhancement for MLDS specialists and principals are mini lessons on different topics under the content of student well-being. These mini lessons are grab-and-go lesson plans for principals to take and use with their staff. Each is organized into about 30 to 60-minute time slots, perfect for staff meetings or planning or PLC meetings. These are ready to use, and MLDS specialists will make them available for principals as they cover specific topics. New mini lessons are currently being developed for student well-being and will be available later this fall. Included here are some suggestions on how mentors can follow up with principals regarding the learning they will have undertaken in the student well-being treatment. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Mitchell, to discuss the new content around academic acceleration.
Thank you so much. So underneath academic acceleration, you will find these concepts and trainings embedded within Learning Experience 2 and Treatment 18, Developing Excellent Instruction. Academic acceleration has been defined by the MLDS team and is built around 4 tenets. These 4 tenets are from the Opportunity Myth, TNTP 2018, and those tenets are grade appropriate assignments, meaning most, if not all, students need access to grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep student engagement, and high expectations. So we know, and you know, as principal mentors, that principal leadership is key. And research shows that besides the teacher having a strong impact in the success of students, the number 2 person in that building is the principal. The principal sets the conditions and the foundations and the structures so that teachers can do their job. And so when we talk about academic acceleration, principal leadership is key. They need to have an understanding of achievement data to determine progress towards grade level standards. They need to be able to help teachers use student data to personalize and scaffold instructional strategies in real time. And principals need to be able to ensure that equitable and supportive learning environments are created and sustained. So one big piece that I'm going to carry over to this webinar that we discussed in the webinar a year ago is the difference between remediation and acceleration. And that being said, we're not saying that students should never be remediated if they need it, but they shouldn't spend the majority of their day, the majority of their week, the majority of their time in remediation and miss grade level content because they're never, ever going to catch up. So we believe that students should spend the majority of their time on grade appropriate work with appropriate support and scaffolds to ensure that they can access that content. So academic acceleration also has new mini lessons. They were developed and they are readily available. And the titles of those mini lessons are recognizing and enhancing high quality tier 1 instruction, providing meaningful feedback, understanding scaffolding, differentiation and modifications, the impact of school learning culture on academic acceleration, student well-being, and teacher recruitment, and coaching teachers on high impact instructional strategies, and then creating the right conditions and supports for those high impact instructional strategies to succeed. So as a mentor, you might be thinking, well, what do I ask these principals? How do we get them on board and help them grow in their understanding? In the new mentor resource guide that we're going to show you in a little bit, there are questions recommended for you to use. And these bullet points under standard 3 are very strong for you to use with academic acceleration. And it really helps to focus them on being the instructional leader, assessing the current level of instruction in their building, building structures for collaboration, developing strategies to provide feedback to teachers, and asking them to tell you more about the next steps that they're going to take to enhance instruction and ensure learning for all students in the building. As you're going through these materials and you're thinking about working with these principals this year, think about what else could you ask? Because you know that powerful questions are the ones that principals can't answer readily. They're the powerful questions that they go back and think about and think more deeply and come back and discuss at a future time. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Dr. Johnson, and he's going to tell you more about teacher recruitment and development.
Well, how's it going, mentors? I know you've been sitting a few minutes. I just want this conversation around teacher recruitment and development. One of the things that we think is important about this conversation, about conversations related to this, is that this further underscores the idea that the school leader is singularly the most important aspect of student academic performance. Nobody's arguing that effective instruction is not high up on the list, but as we identify a particular person, a particular individual, only one person is responsible for hiring the staff, managing the staff, ensuring that operations are effective, and being held to account for student academic performance. Only one person does that. That's why the principal is the single most important person as we think about what happens in schools, in particular around this conversation around teacher recruitment and development. We think about teacher and recruitment, we think about teacher recruitment and development, but a piece of that is this idea of retention, the idea that we want to keep the people that we think are having a positive impact on students. Well, that's part of development. We think it's difficult to retain people who don't feel valued, who don't feel like they can grow, who don't feel supported, and that's what development does. And so thinking about recruitment and development, so teacher recruitment and development requires school leaders to develop skills that are not clear and coherent, often in principal licensure programs. That's why this particular one is important. Your relationship with them will be um, valuable, because oftentimes there are experiences that you have developed over the course of your careers that weren't necessarily part of your preparation, that you can help impart that to aspiring leaders who want to be transformational ultimately in their leadership um, execution. So, but as we think about developing a staff, what do we mean by that? So by developing a staff, it means you're growing your staff in various ways, and all the ways that are necessary to support learning and success in the broadest possible sense in your building by determining the following. So this is important. So as you think about student well-being, as you think about academic acceleration, of course, it's important that we bring people in that have those skills, but we also have to manage the people, develop the people who we have in our buildings who need to be shored up. And the only way to do that effectively is to, one, be clear with where you are in relation to the vision and mission that you've laid out for your building. Where are we? And making sure that's clearly communicated. And then everybody exploring the idea of where do we want to go? We're all bought in, everybody's sharing that idea. And then ultimately, we have to have, as in this relationship, as school leaders, but also as mentors who are supporting school leaders, having a clear sense of what do we need to get to the place that we want to go. And that becomes the development. How do we prepare our staffs? So teacher recruitment and development, the idea of, of developing the folks that we have and also managing our staffs. Now, having said that, I think that, thinking about that, when we're talking about development and retaining people and retaining effective teachers, everyone within the building, within the learning community, must understand their value in the shared vision for collective learning in the building. Everybody has to understand the role that they play and understand that everybody has a role, from the people who are putting food on trays to the people who are changing, to who are cleaning the mirrors in the bathroom. Everybody has a role to play. And it's important that people buy in to ensure the success of student and staff learning. Everybody needs to grow. But this is not growth in some superficial sense. This growth has to be fundamentally supported and based upon the, the value that people feel they have must be meaningful and connected to the collective vision and collective success. That sentence reads to the collective vision and success, but it could also read to the collective vision of success, right? So as we think about those, some important considerations. Without question, school leaders are significant factors in the issue of recruitment and development for a host of reasons, and most of them I've already gone through, right? But teacher effectiveness is consistently identified as a critical factor in student academic achievement. So as a consequence, school leaders must be guided by the question, how do I get the best out of our staffs? How do we get the school leaders asking themselves that question and thinking beyond their particular interests, even having to account for their own shortcomings in places that they need to grow. Retaining effective teachers stands out as a goal that is directly impacts student performance. You want to keep teachers that are effective, and you want to support teachers who in areas in which they need to grow. But as you do that, you have to be thinking about what intervention strategies are necessary to move the building along the school leader's desired learning path. Each building, as you think about these relationships with your school leaders and the mentor relationship, helping them flesh out the desired learning path for the building, having them be as crystal clear as they can be with that in their own minds, really supports the idea of academic performance, academic acceleration, student well-being, retention, academic growth. All those things are connected to being clear about this strategy under what circumstances is it most effective. And ultimately, each one of my colleagues have both mentioned the importance of relationships that matter in every aspect of the process. The relationships matter between the school leaders and the staff, between the staff members themselves, and of course, the relationship between staff and students. But the relationship between students matters too. So the idea that relationships matter in every aspect of the process is an important consideration, particularly as we think about the conditions we set in our school buildings that that are set as the framework for teaching and learning to thrive. Now, thinking about this idea of those conditions and promoting conditions that invite teaching and learning to thrive, one of the things that we have to do is be clear about our learning communities. Who are they? What are their needs? And how do we support them? And in what ways do we need to grow to ensure that every member of our learning community has what they need to be successful? And no one school leader can do that by themselves, which is in part why your relationship with them as a mentor is important. And one of the things we think is important is having school leaders develop partnerships, which is another way of saying relationships with people outside the learning community that helps them bring to bear resources that support learning to the various learning communities within a school. And none of this happens just by happenstance. Every member of the community has to own the collective vision, and everybody has to be motivated to see success where it has not been before. So the idea of level 3 ownership and motivation, and ultimately culture represents the conditions in the school building that either support learning, teaching and learning to support in ways for it to thrive, or it doesn't. But we have to engage our communities with the collective effort to ensure that we have a culture that values learning at its highest levels, and using that as the framework to support our learning paths. But ultimately, one of the things that we have to think about as a ministry as part of supporting our people is identifying for them potential career paths, how they can developing opportunities for each member of our community to find ways to demonstrate their leadership and their learning, what they have learned, how that contributes to success of the collective. So those five levers: learning communities, understanding who they are and how we support them; partnerships, people outside the building, but also could be people that are connected to the building, but partnerships that help bring to bear the resources that we need to support our learning communities, and ensuring that every member of the community feels valued and motivated to realize the shared vision. And the culture and framework is how do buildings and people with staffs within buildings work together to ensure that they have access to their best possible selves as often as possible, and making that framework predictable for everyone involved. And then, of course, lastly, ensuring that teachers understand that they have opportunities to grow. Now, thinking about both Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Nixon Green talked about many lessons in our areas, and there's some for human resources, for this teacher recruitment and retention, how to develop partnerships, how to understand and communicate about career paths, culture and framework, ownership and motivation, learning communities. All of these are many lessons they can support specific kinds of conversations that you might be having with a school leader that support the idea of building a shared collective vision, a shared learning plan, and identifies how each member of the current community provides value in supporting that, in the realization of that vision. And then we talked about lessons that are coming up, lessons that haven't happened, but they're in the works and they'll be out this fall. This idea of collecting meaningful data and making actionable decisions. That is in part a necessary element of developing an effective learning plan. Focus, focus school walkthroughs. How do we know where we are? And how do we determine what we need, what we need to get where we want to be? School walkthroughs can be valuable assets, processing that. And leading staff to develop a framework for instructional priorities. This is in part what we're talking about, helping staffs develop in the various ways in which they need to. What they need, how they need to develop an academic acceleration might be different than how they need to develop in being helpful in student well-being. So the various ways in which development is necessary, each school leader has a responsibility to do that. And we've thought of, and this is a mini lesson that helps you think about that. And of course, designing a professional development plan with clear objectives and outcomes, right? So that the professional development plan is connected to our learning plan and to our vision and to our collective mission, so everybody understands what we need to learn and how we need to learn it together to realize the success that we're all determined to see. Now, having said that, we want to think about this relationship, this mentor relationship, as dynamic and dynamic and unique in that each one of your relationships will be somewhat different. And even if you have 3 or 4 relationships with 3 or 4 different school leaders, those relationships will all be different, and that different could all be appropriate. So as we think about the relationship, we want you to think about as mentors, how can mentors help school leaders develop school cultures that enable both teaching and learning to thrive? That's been a big piece of the things I've been talking about. But as you have conversations with your school leaders, with your mentee school leaders, inviting them to think about that in its broadest possible terms. How do you as mentors support school leaders in developing partnerships that matter? These are important questions because none of us has it all inside our heads, has everything inside of our heads that we need to be successful. Those partnerships matter. What kinds of partnerships have you developed? What kinds of challenges have you experienced as you've attempted to develop partnerships that matter? But ultimately, how can mentors help school leaders identify and support an effective building learning plan? I don't think enough building leaders do that. In fact, as a former school leader, I don't think I personally did that enough. And I think when the school leader has a clear understanding of the building and of an effective building plan for their learning community, everything else just sort of falls into place. What you need in terms of professional development, learning gaps, effective instruction, how we strengthen that, all comes into play, falls into place when we have a clear, effective building learning plan. But ultimately, school leaders ultimately, how can this relationship with you as a mentor help school leaders support elements of effective teaching across cultural communities, regardless of preparation of their pre-service preparation? Because teachers are coming to us now from a variety of communities. Some of them are coming from pre-service. Less than a third are now coming from pre-service university academic programs. A good piece of them are coming from a good piece of our new teachers are coming from outside the profession, people who are changing professions. How do we address both the cultural differences of teachers, but also how that might impact the different preparation pathways that people have that show up in our school buildings, while all the while responding to the unique teaching and learning challenges present in their building. Each school leader has to respond to the unique challenge within their building, but you've got to do it while understanding and assessing different cultural communities and being able to develop your staffs from where they are to where you need them to be. So these are some questions we want you to think about as a resource. But thinking about resources, here's some more. So we want to talk about 3 resources during the course of our, but between now and the time we end. One, we want to point you out to the website. We want to look at some of the infographics that help further explain some of the things that Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Nixon Green were talking about. And then ultimately we will end by allowing you to have some awareness of the mentor resource guide. So thinking about the website, what we like to do is just kind of take an opportunity to sort of show you what that means. So if you start with our work, if you come to this page of the website, as you go through it, one of the things you'll see in the beginning is just a small, brief understanding of what MLDS is and how they and what MLDS is and the goals that they have structured in their operations. But also, as we continue to manage the website, you'll be able to see more about recruitment and retention, more resources in the areas of promoting educational access and student well-being. The website provides you with more resources that you can ultimately use to support your relationship with school leaders. But ultimately, we wanted to show you 3 important resources that are relatively new. We talked about what we call infographics, and we have 3 of them. We'll start with teacher recruitment and development because that's the area we're talking about right now. And all 3 areas has an infographic. For ours, this sort of tries to tell the story of recruitment, retention, and development challenges. Recruitment and retention and development challenges in a 11:17 visual. And so much of what you see in this, what you would see when you go look at this infographic, is some of the things we've been talking about. How effective teachers lead to high academic achievement and growth. That's connected to our growth plans, effective instruction. How do we ensure that we're recruiting and retaining effective teachers? That's a part of that idea. Effective principals exhibit low rates of teacher turnover. When we develop cultures where people feel valued, they're less likely to leave. Right? And turnover goes down. And as we think about principal support has been identified as a decisive factor in teachers' decisions to remain in the schools, this is the idea we're talking about, why principals are the single most important individual connected to student academic achievement and building academic growth, because no one person is responsible for as much as the school leader is. And so this infographic just sort of gives you more detail. You can go through it when you come to the website. You can spend more time at it. But we just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce you to some new resources that have been developed since the last time we've done one of these videos. So having said that, we're thinking about, we want to take you through each one of these infographics, each one of the 3 areas. And so we'll let Dr. Nixon Green talk about student well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. As you look at this infographic, you will see a lot of information. What I'd like for you to think about as you're looking at this is, how can my school or a school become trauma sensitive? And as you think about that and have that mindset in place, tune in to the practices and the 4 elements that are listed here, the 4 essential elements, because essentially what that does is it helps you create a framework for your school to build on so that you can become trauma informed and work towards being trauma sensitive. So this is a great visual as you're talking about, well, what are some of the things that go into being a trauma sensitive school, for you to start taking those pieces and looking at them one at a time so that you can build them out in your setting to ultimately be in the best position to support your students emotionally and academically.
And the 3rd infographic we're going to look at is academic acceleration. And just to show you again how we got here, the homepage of this website is impactmlds.com. It will be also included in the slides that you will receive. And then I just went to the resources tab, and this is where these infographics are and some other resources. But academic acceleration, again, this just gives you the highlights. It's an easy way for you to explain this to someone else. Like Dr. Johnson said, don't print it on 8.5 by 11 paper because it will be too tiny to read. But if you you print it in a little bit larger, like legal size, or even a nice poster, these print off really, really well. And so you can see for academic acceleration, we start right off the bat about the difference between remediation and acceleration. And we're not saying that you should never, ever remediate with a student, but we are saying that there are lots and lots of students who never leave remediation and they fall further and further behind. So we want to accentuate the importance of keeping students on grade level as much as possible. We've got the 4 tenets here that we discussed earlier, and MLDS specialists came up with the core beliefs. So while the tenet might be a little bit vague, they go into more detail about what that actually means in the state of Missouri. Again, leadership is a key factor for academic acceleration because principals have that very, very important job of setting the systems and structures and culture for this to take place. And then as you can see, there's more detail as you go down the infographic. So again, a quick and easy way for you to identify these key terms. And if you print them on large paper. So the other resource that I want to show you today, and this is brand new, is the MLDS Mentor Resource Guide. And this was developed by your MLDS specialists. They took the old guide that you've been working with for probably a decade, and they just tidied it up and condensed it and published it in a way so that it flows, it's easy to work with. And so you can just see here, as we look at like the table of contents, some of these things will be very, very familiar to you. What the benefits of mentoring are, what your role as an MLDS mentor is defined here. You've got some suggested mentor activities, some problem-solving models that you can use and take principals through. The school walk-around protocol is embedded in this. And I showed you on academic acceleration some key questions. Key questions for each of these standards are also included. In fact, if I skip down to about, you have the MLDS standards described, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and then you've got question prompts to use there as well. So again, it's a handy, clean, tidy resource for you. It should give you all of the information that you need, and maybe some information that you didn't know you needed. It's there as well. There are other resources here about the project impact, your MLDS regional contacts. If you're not sure who the regional contacts are, you can find that here as well. And so with that, I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for tuning in. I know that watching a webinar where you have no interaction whatsoever can be a little bit tedious, but we do appreciate your time and attention. If you have additional questions, please check in with the MLDS specialists in your region. And if you need additional information, you can contact Jim Masters or Kevin Freeman. Their emails are here on this slide. As you get access to this video, you will also have access to a PDF of these slides, and you'll have those hyperlinks readily available for your convenience. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and wish you all the very best year this year. And thank you for your work with new principals in the state of Missouri. So with that, Dr. Nixon Green, Dr. Johnson, do you have any closing comments?
No.
Indeed. Have a great day.
Thank you for all that you do.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.